Hello class. So you should have downloaded Photoshop, Lightroom, and Bridge. By simply coming down here, you see where it says download trial. By clicking download trial, you should have downloaded all three of those programs. However, like I said, in our discussion, you're not going to open Lightroom right now. Right now, we're going to work exclusively in Bridge and Photoshop. So basically, now that you've downloaded your trials, you should have followed all of the prompts, and the programs should be installed on your computers. What we're going to do now is we're going to open up our new programs, and I'm going to show you something quickly. So, alright, locate Bridge and Photoshop on your computer and open the programs up. Okay, so Bridge has just now opened up for me, and Photoshop should be opening up shortly. Okay, and here's Photoshop. So both Bridge and Photoshop are open. First things first, we want to use an editor called Adobe Camera Raw, which exists in between Bridge and Photoshop. So we're going to look at Bridge as a program or an app created by Adobe meant for you to locate images quickly on your computer. So if you have any hard drives plugged into your computer, you see I have two hard drives plugged in right here. And then also any of the folders on my computer, I can click on these folders and you see there's documents here. Let's see, more documents here. But if there are images within a folder, the images pop up quickly, and then if you highlight the images down here, they open up larger into this main viewer. And then this just lets you see keywords, metadata, all sorts of stuff. If you look up here, we can click through different workspaces and view our images differently, but that's going to be another video another time. All right, so right now this is simply how to make Adobe Camera Raw your main editor. So if you click on Adobe Bridge using a Mac, up here at the top, you should see Camera Raw Preferences. I believe if you're using a PC, you would come up here to this menu, but you would find Preferences and Camera Raw Preferences either in the File or Edit drop-down menus, and then just make sure that you're reading each thing if you're using a PC. And I believe you go to Preferences, and then underneath Preferences you would find Camera Raw, or you might just see Camera Raw right out there, but you know, find it. When you do, click on it, and then this dialog box is going to open up. Alright, and you want to change the last two options under JPEG and TIFF handling, and you want to check off for the program to automatically open all supported JPEGs, automatically open all supported TIFFs. Hit OK. Okay, so basically what's going to happen now is when you select an image to work with, instead of it opening directly from Bridge into Photoshop and just opening up here into our palette, what's going to happen is it's going to open up instead into Adobe Camera Raw, where you can apply some edits before you start to work on your file in Photoshop. So I'm just looking for a large image file here. Going back to the beginning. Just bear with me. As you can see, some of these are really small because they've been sized for web resolution. So actually I'm going to use this image here. Okay, so let's double click it. And as you see, it opens into Adobe Camera Raw. I'm going to create another video for how to edit in Adobe Camera Raw, but if you want to kind of play around before I do post that video, up here we have different tools that we can use to edit our picture, and then over here we have our basic editing menu where you can control temperature, exposure, contrast, and we'll go through all of those things later. And then you can even click through these different options and, you know, maybe make a black and white picture. There's all sorts of different options here, and these are what we would call global edits. You can do a little spot editing with Adobe Camera Raw, but the majority of the edits that you're going to make here would be considered global edits where they apply to the entire picture. Once you finish your image, once you finish editing it and you're happy with it, you're going to open the image into Photoshop. Okay, so now that your image is opened into Photoshop, you would now work with it and apply whatever edits you see fit, which could go from, once again, editing globally to making really precise selections and maybe editing just that one selection or even adding things in. Anything that you can think of or imagine, you can now create in Photoshop as long as you understand how to use the tools. Um, so, um, let's say that I'm editing and I decide I want to work with the levels in this image, which is basically the exposure, but you can control it with the dark tones, mid-tones, and highlights, just playing around in the different with the different controls. But okay, so let's say I want to make my image have a washed out appearance. Okay, so I turn around and I apply that edit here, the levels edit here in my layers palette, and let's say I decide I don't want the whole image to be washed out, just the sides, but I want the inner portion of the image to, look regular. So I'm going to paint black onto my white mask right here so that where it's white, my edit shows through, but where it's black, my edit does not show through. Okay, and I can toggle the eyeball on and off. This is not an edit I would necessarily make, but I'm just trying to show you all that, you can turn around and do something very specific like that. Okay, so for whatever reason, I can no longer edit. If I want to save this image so that I can continue editing it at another time, that means I want to save it in a lossless format, and I don't want to have my layers flattened. I want to open it again and have it look exactly like this with my layers present. So I would either save it as a TIFF or a Photoshop file. So I would come up here to File, come down to Save As, and right up front, matter of fact, you may see a small dialog box like this. You hit the triangle and it will expand, but what's highlighted in blue is your image's title. When titling your images, you only want to use letters and numbers. Stay away from punctuation symbols, things like that, because it can confuse the computer. It really wants to see one period before the file extension. Okay, so you give your image a title, and then here to the left, you can tell it where it's going to save, which hard drive, which folder. I would suggest on your desktop, because your desktop is an easy place to find, creating an Intro to Photo Spring 2015 folder and saving your work there. So if I want to work with it again, like I said, I would use a Photoshop file or a TIFF file. The main difference between these files is a Photoshop file is a dedicated Adobe file, so if you wanted to open it in any of those other apps that we saw in the beginning, let me see if I can bring that back up. So if you were working with Illustrator or InDesign or After Effects, blah, 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 any of these things, you would basically, and all of these trials are available. Download them, play around, see, what you can learn and stuff. But anyway, if you want to edit this file further in using any of those programs, I would suggest saving it as a Photoshop file. However, there are other editing programs that have nothing to do with Adobe, and TIFF is a more universal file format that's going to save your layers and everything also. With that said, a Photoshop file and a TIFF file are going to be large file sizes, and like I said, they are lossless, which means they're not going to decay. So yeah, if you're going to continue to edit, you want to save your original file with your layers, you're going to save the Photoshop file or a TIFF file. Once you have everything selected, you hit save, and this dialog box may come up. You just hit OK and let it save. Okay, next, you've finished editing your image and you're ready to submit it in our discussion area for class. With that said, you don't need to submit a large file that's going to have a long upload time. Also, because you're not printing it on paper, the resolution and the quality of the file doesn't have to be as high as it's just not necessary. It's going to be shown on a screen. And so, something that's not necessarily necessary is to flatten your image, but if you have all of these layers over here and your layers can get you can basically have almost like an infinite number of layers over here. So before you save it, before you save it to submit online, you can flatten your image. And like I said, it's not necessary because a lot of the time when you save as a JPEG, now these later editions of Photoshop flatten it for you. After you flatten it, you come to Mode, all right, and make sure that it's at 8 bits. And you come to Image Size, and you're going to make the resolution 72. It should be 300 when printing, but for screen resolution, 72 is sufficient. You hit OK, and you notice how the image shrinks down because now it's a smaller file. I can zoom in, and as you see on my screen, it more or less, has a good quality. It's a little pixelated, but this is a good representation of the image to show on screen. Now that I've gone to Mode, made sure it was 8 bits. Now that I've gone to Image Size and made sure that my resolution is 72, and now that I've come to Layer and flattened all of my layers, I'm now ready to save. So I come to File, Save As. Alright, and now I want to save it as a JPEG. Alright, and just JPEG. You don't need JPEG 2000 or JPEG Stereo. Hit JPEG, and you notice this file extension changes to .jpg, alright? And you notice that as a copy is active, you can select here, but you cannot select layers or any of that. And this is not a lossless file. This file, the more you save it, will degrade. So let's hit save. And it's going to ask image quality at 12, and you can leave it at 12 because we've already changed the resolution in the program. So we're going to hit OK. Okay, and now this image is saved. Based on where you're saving it, you're going to go into our discussion, and there's already a video in the discussion area that tells you how to put photographs into your posts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the discussion area with this video. See you for the next one. Bye.